U.S. job cuts explode. Hey everyone, it's Wolfgang. Is Doge to blame for all the job cuts that I'm going to describe? We'll find out. So, towards the end of this, I'm going to present some information about the Bureau of Labor Statistics jobs data. So, it's come under scrutiny. I'll leave it at that, but I'll describe this at the end. But first, I want to talk about the huge increase in job cuts in the U.S. So, starting with last month, May of 2025, 98,816 jobs were cut. By the way, a lot of this data comes from Challenger, Gray, and Christmas. So almost 99,000 jobs cut in May. That's almost a 50% increase from last year. Almost a 50% increase from May of 2024. So you see the trend in job cuts is increasing. And that's not a small increase, 50% increase, 47%. That's a pretty big increase from a year ago. So some of the reasons for job cuts. Some companies have tried raising prices. So when tariffs are announced, if the company eats the tariff, it cuts into their profit margin. They lose some profit if they eat the tariff. And some companies have said, we don't want to do that. We want to pass on the tariffs. We're going to raise prices on everything we sell. Well, consumers are not buying it. Instead of consuming at the same number of units, consumers have reduced the number of units they're buying at companies. About 60% of U.S. companies have reported lower unit sales, lower revenue, and no growth. So the lesson learned, the takeaway is, in the current economic situation with consumers in the job market, because that's a lot of jobs lost. That's a huge increase from last year. So you have to recognize that if job losses have increased almost 50% from a year ago, you can just imagine what the mood of employed people is in this country right now. They're not feeling too certain about their job. And one of the things that's come out is the number of people quitting their jobs has dropped significantly because of that. Job cuts have increased. People are concerned. So consumers are not willing to pay higher prices right now. This is just not a good time for companies to say, we want to retain our profit margin. We are going to pass on the tariff price increases. We're going to raise prices on our products. It's not working. 60% of U.S. companies are reporting a drop in unit sales, lower revenue, and no growth. So from the outside, that's pretty obvious. No, because most of us have known for a while that the job market has been trending down, that the job market has been poor. It will recover eventually, like it has in the past. But for right now, the job market sucks. And most of us have known that for a while. So why companies are raising prices, it's a mystery why they would think that's feasible now. I mean, it's like, of course they're going to not have any growth. Of course they're going to have lower unit sales, selling a lower number of units because they raise prices. So here are some companies who have tried and cannot pass on higher prices from tariffs. The maker of Jack Daniels, it's an alcoholic beverage, has reported a drop in revenue. Macy's announced lower earnings after they tried price hikes. Walmart, same thing, a drop in sales after they announced price hikes. They have actually done some price hikes. Best Buy, Volkswagen, Mazda, and a lot of other companies, same problem. They have attempted to pass on price hikes because of the tariffs to consumers. This is not the time to do it. We've got a huge increase of job cuts from last year. That means over the past year, the number of job cuts, or the job market, has been trending down while the job cuts have been increasing. So if you think about what the jobs number announced were, they claimed that I think it was 139,000 jobs had been created that beat estimates. So here's the truth, okay? And this is the truth. So they're not going to tell you this part, okay? They should. When the Bureau of Labor Statistics announces their jobs data, I mean, the most recent announcement on Friday was 139,000 new jobs created. If they told the complete truth, they would tell you the following. And by the way, for 12 of the last 14 months, we have revised downward the number of jobs that we reported. They have, for 12 of the last 14 months, they have corrected themselves and said, the number of jobs we reported, that it was too high. There were actually fewer jobs created than we thought. So that is a systematic. It's a systematic form of misleading the public. So as to why they're doing that, we have our own ideas why that's happening. I'm not going to go into it, but because it's a little bit, it could be considered controversial as to why they might want to misrepresent the jobs data. But the fact is, in 12 of the last 14 months, they come out and announce jobs, and then they later correct themselves. And they say, we actually created fewer jobs were created than we announced. 12 of the last 14 months. So here are some of the jobs getting the most cuts in the current economy. These are the parts of these are the types of companies that are seeing the most job cuts. Service jobs. Now, what's a service job? Like a cleaning company that does a regular service to clean apartment buildings, hotels, warehouses, industrial plants. Service companies who do that kind of cleaning, window washing, any of the trades services where someone comes to your home to make a repair to your air conditioning, plumbing, anything that does not involve selling a product but involves selling an activity, a service. They've had the biggest job cuts in 5 years. 5 years since May of 2020. They have the number of job cuts is high, and it hasn't been this high since May of 2020. Now, I don't know if you remember what May 2020 was, but that was that was peak COVID when the economy was being shut down. The economy was being shut down 5 years ago at this time, right? And people could not perform service jobs because people were being told to quarantine in their home, not go outside, not go to work, not go shopping, wear masks everywhere, and keep a minimum safe distance of 6 feet. The economy was nearly shut down 5 years ago. And right now, service jobs have been cut at the highest level since that time. That's a huge drop. A huge drop in the number of service jobs. Retail jobs. A 274% increase in jobs lost compared to this time last year. 274% increase in the number of job cuts. So again, the labor market is shrinking. The number of job cuts is increasing. Retail jobs, obviously, the reasons for those include price hikes. That, people are not going to pay higher prices. Consumers are not buying the higher prices. So when retail companies cannot sell, when their revenue drops, they start laying people off because labor is one of the biggest expenses for a company. Sometimes it's the biggest expense for a company. So huge number of job cuts in retail. Tech jobs have lost tech job cuts have increased 35% over this time last year. 35% increase in tech jobs. I thought the tech job cuts would have been much higher than retail and much higher than service jobs. But in fact, service jobs, biggest job loss in 5 years. Retail jobs, 274% increase over last year. And tech jobs, that's still high. 35% increase over last year is still a big increase. So people know this. It's not just these three types of jobs. Across the job market, people are noticing that companies are slow to hire or not hiring at all. Everyone is saying don't quit your job because you'll have a very hard time finding a new job because companies are not hiring. And companies are cutting staff. So layoffs, not hiring, people don't want to quit because they're concerned they won't be able to find another job. So the number of job cuts have exploded in the economy. So I want to say something about the Bureau of Labor Statistics, because the announcement of the job growth, they said we beat expectations. We increased the number of jobs created by 139,000. Wait a month, and they will announce we were wrong. We actually lost. We actually did not create as many jobs. So, for example, in March and April of this year, after the Bureau of Labor Statistics came out and said we created X number of jobs, they corrected that. They reduced that by 95,000 jobs in March and April of this year. Huge drops in the number of jobs created. So the reason I wanted to mention this is there has been suspicion for a long time now that the data coming out of the Bureau of Labor Statistics is wrong and is being manipulated. I don't want to go into the reasons why, but if you do some research online, you can get some hints about that. So the Economic Policy Innovation Center has has begun to scrutinize the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the number of jobs they announce, because they're just wildly inaccurate. 12 of the last 14 months, they've come out a month later and said fewer jobs were created than we announced last month. 12 out of the last 14 months. So in August of 2024, last year, the Bureau of Labor Statistics made an announcement that almost 1 million jobs, 818,000 jobs had not been created that they previously claimed were created. So when you hear the Bureau of Labor Statistics announcing jobs created, do not believe it. I don't want to say that they're lying, okay? But there's a systematic attempt to mislead on the number of jobs created. So last August of 2024, the Bureau of Labor Statistics announced, 818,000 jobs, almost 1 million jobs that we previously claimed had been created, actually were not created, did not exist. So politicians have started to scrutinize those numbers. People people throughout the private sector and in government now too have noticed this for a long time, that the problem is these job numbers is what the Fed uses to decide interest rates. The interest rate, a lot of people are saying that interest rates are being held artificially high, and part of the reason is the job announcements from the Bureau of Labor Statistics are not correct. And we know they're not. 12 of the last 14 months, a month after they announce job numbers, they come out and say, we were wrong, fewer jobs were created. Sometimes it's significant. Last August, they said we were wrong by 818,000 jobs. So when you hear the Bureau of Labor Statistics job announcements, I would recommend not believing them. I know I'm saying that's strongly worded, but I would not put any confidence in them. Wait for a month, because here's what they do. They wait for a month, and then they announce a revised number. And then another month goes by, and they announce a newly revised number. So, for example, they announced job numbers for June, this Friday. A month from now, in July, they're going to revise what they announced this Friday. Another month goes by in August, they will revise that number again. So they take a second and third look at the numbers they announced, and they say we were wrong. Fewer jobs were created. So it's systematic, it's unreliable, and unfortunately right now, the Fed, the Federal Reserve, is keeping interest rates high because they're not looking at the revised numbers. They're not looking at history and saying, we can't really trust the first announcement of the BLS job numbers. We're going to have to wait for a month or two and see what the real numbers are, because when they announce them, they're consistently, chronically too high. And so that's creating a lot of problems in the economy. One of the problems it creates is in the real estate market, there are 500,000 more homes for sale than there are buyers. So that is hurting parts of the economy that include appliances, flooring, lighting, remodeling services, roofing, landscaping, everything that you do when you sell a home or buy a home. All those things you buy, all those people you hire are not being bought, are not being hired. So they're keeping interest rates high. People are not buying homes. There are 500,000 more homes for. It's a record. 500,000 more homes for sale than there are buyers. It's a record. It hasn't been this bad in a long time. So interest rates are too high. They're relying on false data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics to set interest rates, and it's a shame. But job cuts have been increasing. Over 2024, service jobs, retail jobs, and tech jobs, those job cuts have just increased a lot. I mean, the biggest number of job cuts in 5 years, 200 for service jobs. Retail jobs, job cuts are up 274%, 35% increase in tech job cuts. So times are tough, and parts of the government are reporting misleading data. They are now coming under scrutiny. They're being scrutinized because people are tired of it. Most people have known that those job numbers were bogus. Last August, they said we announced 818,000 jobs were created, and none of those were actually created. That was like setting off an explosion. It created a lot of scrutiny on the jobs numbers. And so when the job numbers are announced, the only people taking those numbers seriously, Jerome Powell and the Fed, unfortunately. This is not a knock on Jerome Powell personally. This is a knock on the Fed ignoring the fact that the job announcements are revised downward consistently, chronically, 12 of the last 14 months. So if you have any questions about this, Most of us are working in the economy, and I'm sorry it's affecting a lot of people adversely, and it shouldn't be like this. And I'm not sure how long it's going to take to correct, but job cuts have sort of skyrocketed, and I'm sorry you guys are probably some of you are experiencing that, but things will get better. So stay hopeful, and just remind yourself that this always corrects itself over time. When the wrong people leave and better people come in who are more responsible, generally that's when things start to improve. So hopefully this will get better. I would recommend that if you operate a company and you're trying to raise prices, I do not recommend it. We have no, the last thing we are thinking about doing in what we do is raising prices on anyone. The job market does not support it. There are not enough people confident enough in their employment to spend money only on the necessities. So I don't recommend raising prices. If you have any questions about this, please post in the comments. I'd be willing to answer any questions you have. And I really want to thank everyone for watching, and have a great day.